Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 110 of Paranormal NL Podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Pocket Casts. I'm your host, Jen. Now, tonight, it's time to pull up that cozy chair and a nice beverage and listen in to your favorite podcast, Paranormal NL Podcast. It's a place where the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, and anywhere else in the world can share their paranormal experiences. PNL Podcast also believes in supporting people, places, and things to promote paranormal tourism and paranormal networking all over the world. A big thank you again to all, of course, our fans from the PNL Podcast alumni guests from season 1 and 2. And we want to hear your stories. Do you have any paranormal, metaphysical, UFO, cryptid creatures, folklore, historical, military, or just tales of the weird you'd like to share as a guest on my PNL podcast? Please reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail. After your episode, you'll become part of the PNL Podcast Alumni Network. And don't forget, you can also share your stories anonymously, and you can listen with your smart TV for free on that Spotify app. Make sure you click on the Spotify bell or subscribe and follow along on whatever platform you're listening in on to get updates for new episodes. Head on over to Facebook and join our group, Paranormal NL Podcast Group. Find upcoming new PNL episodes in the featured section of the group. We'd love to have you there. We're listening to our fans. Paranormal NL Podcast is coming soon to YouTube. PNL is now on Instagram, and PNL now has a Facebook page for fans who are not on Instagram for Instagram reel drops and sometimes a spot for the PNL Bog Team Facebook Go Lives. That's right. Stay tuned for a new branch of Paranormal NL Podcast with the Bog Team. It's a boots on the ground paranormal investigation team doing local historic investigations in Newfoundland. Our fans asked us, and Paranormal NL merch and the PNL Bog Team merch is now available on TeePublic with lots of different logos and swag items that our fans asked for. Without further ado, let's bring on to the stage tonight our guest. Tonight, I have on the show with me Mr. Steve, I hope I pronounce this right, Firmani, and he's here with us all the
Close
way
enough.
from Massachusetts in the good old US of A. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the show tonight. Now, I understand you know a lot about ufology and MUFON.
Uh, that's correct. I was involved in UFOs before it was called ufology. I was I joined MUFON back in the 70s, and
Yes? Okay.
yeah,
What branch of MUFON are you with? Particularly Massachusetts MUFON or?
well, that's the whole story. It's a I held several positions within MUFON. I started off, you know, and when I was 20, I'm like 71. I'm going to be 72 years old in November, and uh, I joined MUFON when I was 24 years old, and I became a field investigator when I was 25 years old. And it all started. That this is a pretty interesting story. It all started when I was 17 years old. No, not 17, but 12, 13 years old. I was still in grade school when a couple of guys came into the classroom, and they were friends of mine. They were good guys, but they were kind of the nerdy type. You know, everybody would give them a hard time. And they came into class telling everybody they saw a flying saucer. And everybody was giving them a hard time. And that got me mad because I they were friends of mine. So I told them all off. And that afternoon, after I got out of school, I went to the local library downtown and started looking at books on UFOs. And I picked up a book by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was actually known as the father of modern ufology.
Yes, he was.
And so I read a book by him, and that's how it all got started. I started reading, and it just blew up. I just went on from there. Uh, I mean, I got a chance to meet a lot of these people. Uh, I met Hynek. Unfortunately, the situation was a sad one with Hynek because at the time I was writing a small monthly publication, and I had connected with Hynek, and I asked him if I'd be able to, because they were going to be doing, uh, he was going to be speaking at a conference in Massachusetts. So I asked him if I could introduce myself and asked him if I could do an interview with him for my publication. And
Right.
he said that, and it was great. We set it up, and when I got to Massachusetts, uh, when I got to the conference, I was immediately introduced to Dr. Hynek, and he says we talked for a little bit, and I said, he said after lunch we'll sit down and we'll do the interview. Sad thing that happened was halfway through the morning session, Dr. Hynek started feeling ill,
Oh.
and he was taken out of the conference and went to the hospital. And the day after, he passed away.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, my hero passed away right while I was there ready to interview him.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Steve.
No, it was unbelievable.
Steve, you know a lot about Dr. Hynek. What happened to him? What was his cause of death?
Uh, not it wasn't publicized that much. It might have been his heart or something, but it really wasn't specified. It was kept kind of quiet.
Right.
I also, I mean, a lot of bad luck with people like that, famous people that I know. Bud Hopkins. You know who Bud Hopkins
Bud
is?
Hopkins. Can you
Yes.
tell the people listening who Bud Hopkins is?
Bud Hopkins is probably, like Hynek was the father of modern ufology. Bud Hopkins was the father of. He's the one that he and a psychologist from Harvard University were the first ones that started doing hypnotic regression on
Okay.
abductees. And they were the first ones that started it. Bud ended up writing a book called Missing Time. And
Missing time, right?
yes,
About hypnotic regression.
right. That they were the first ones. He and this Dr. John Mack, a psychiatrist out of Harvard University, and they got to be really close, and they developed the technique for doing hypnotic regressions. Unfortunately, I didn't think I knew Bud that well, but I guess he started following a lot of stuff that I was doing in investigations, uh, and he had passed away, and I was shocked. They had a memorial for him in New York City, and it was like with invitation only, and I was
Okay.
shocked to get an invitation.
Oh, you got an invite. Oh,
To his
good.
yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah,
drove down with memorial service in New York City.
yeah.
Now
A lot of
that's it.
people there.
Yes, there would have been a heck of a lot more if it was open.
Right.
But yeah, so that's a couple things. I went, like I said, I became a field investigator at 25. I mean, 25 years old, and in '77, I
In
became
1977.
1977. I became assistant state director for MUFON in Massachusetts,
Oh, wow.
and I was working along with this guy, good friend of mine. Yeah, he's passed away. Everybody, I'm getting old, so everybody
I'm
else,
sorry, Steve.
everybody else is. But his name was Jules Valancourt, and Jules was the original investigator for the Betty Andreasen abduction case,
Right?
which actually happened. The case did happen in my hometown. So she Betty through Jules and everybody else. I was able to interview Betty, so I got to know Betty and her husband and her daughter Becky very well. So we
That must have been an interesting interview, Steve.
it it was it really was. She was one of the people that actually got
Can you tell
it,
the
it-
listeners more about who Betty was who don't know who she is?
Betty Andreasen was an abductee from Leominster, Massachusetts, which is my hometown, and she when she was a child, she was cause she had moved away from Leominster as an adult, but when she was a child, she was out in her backyard on a swing, playing on a swing set, and she all of a sudden she was abducted. She was visited as a little baby, not a baby but a child, and
Right?
uh,
So she had a
and
lot of things happen when she was young.
correct. That's a lot of that stuff came out under hypnotic regression. So I mean, she was a wonderful, she's a wonderful lady, and so I had the opportunity to know Betty, and I also had the opportunity to know Betty Hill,
Yes.
Bonnie and Betty Hill fame
Tell
up
us
in
more about Betty Hill.
okay, but Bonnie and Betty, they were a mixed racial couple from New Hampshire, and they were coming back from a trip to Canada. They were on their way back, and they were going down this lonely road, and all of a sudden, this object came out of nowhere, beamed the light down on them and everything. It was following them, and all of a sudden, next thing they knew, they were back in Massachusetts. They couldn't remember what happened.
Did this come out for them also through hypnotic regression?
Yes, what in a nutshell, what happened was after they lost consciousness of what was going on under hypnosis, they remember ending up on a side road with the craft on the ground there, and these creatures coming up to the windows of the car, and that's when they were taken up into the saucer, whatever you want to call it. They were taken up, and they had many experiences. Betty was operated on. I mean, yeah, Betty was operated on. Uh,
Did she tell you more about, or were you able to interview her about that?
the funny thing with Betty, my knowing Betty, we talked about stuff, but it's a long, long, long story. I mean, she was there for uh, she was abducted so many times. There, she has memories of the creatures, over her, the heads over her, looking down on it. That they tried to impregnate her. Uh, they used things like that seemed like scalpels that would cut open, almost like they were doing some kind of surgery on her. So there were so many things that happened.
Does she describe the biologicals?
Uh,
What
typical, typical grays,
grays?
typical
Mm-hmm.
gray alien. The same kind of face, same kind of features. Funny thing about knowing Betty was I met her through somebody else as I was investigating a case in Massachusetts, and it was a woman in Ware, Massachusetts, that this case, this woman was an abductee, and she actually ended up, she had one abduction experience, and she ended up uh, damaging her eyesight from the experience. She ended up with macular degeneration in her eyes.
Steve, do you think it was from the radiation, or what did the
That's
doctor
what
say?
they don't know what caused it. They do
Hmm.
not. The doctors that they couldn't explain it. After that experience, she had problems sleeping.
How
She had
old was she when she started getting
oh
that?
God, that was a long time ago. I don't have
Mm.
any notes
She was
on
probably
that.
young or older when it happened, or
Oh, she wasn't. She was never abducted when she was young. She was middle aged
mm-hmm.
when it
Okay,
happened. But
yeah,
that through her is how I met uh, Betty Hill.
right. Did you
So
talk to her husband,
Bonnie,
Barney?
by the time I actually got to talk to meet Betty, Bonnie had already passed away,
Oh, I'm sorry.
unfortunately. But humorous thing about the first time I met Betty, to this woman that had that had macular degeneration, through her I met Betty Hill. Betty always had a post Christmas holiday family get together, and she'd invite family and friends. And this woman with the macular degeneration was one of her friends. So through her, I got invited to Betty's house for that dinner.
Okay.
And I walk into Betty's house. You know what the first thing I did with Betty Hill?
What?
I sat. She says to me, "Do you want to talk about UFOs?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Come here, sit at the table." She hands me a potato peeler, and me and her sat in her kitchen peeling potatoes, talking about UFOs.
Interesting. That's a
And
great
so
story, Steve. Yeah.
Betty was quite the character.
Was she?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But
Did she describe any more things to you?
uh, not. I think
Anything that the
at,
general
at,
public haven't already
at
heard
that
that's
at that
different?
no at that time everything was already out, and all her books had been written. So it's mostly what you read in the books and hear about it.
Hmm. But it's still a good experience for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
Did you get to ask her any of your own personal questions about her experiences?
I did, but I don't remember them because that was like about probably
Right. Yeah.
35 years ago.
Yeah. And did
But
that conversation with her help answer any questions for you?
I had already believed her story of what happened to her, so
Hmm.
it didn't really change any. It, if anything, it strengthened my
It's
belief in the
strengthen your
story.
belief. Right.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. How about any other interviews that pop out in your head without divulging, of course, who they are? Your MUFON investigations, that
Well,
any ones in particular that stand
I've
out?
done. What happened was when I went into after I became a assistant state director, uh, I ended up about a couple years after that. I ended up taking over because my friend Jules, who
Right.
was the state director at the time, he he left MUFON. He had to leave MUFON due to health reasons. So I took over as state director for him, and I did state director. And while I was state director, I was going through all of the cases in Massachusetts and trying to, because I noticed that there were all these cases, they weren't being investigated. They had a backlog of
A
cases because
backlog?
there weren't enough investigators.
How many investigators do you think there were back then?
Oh God, probably about 4 or 5.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So it wasn't, in a particular area. You had to do a lot of traveling.
Right.
So I was looking through a lot of these cases, and I actually updated all of the cases in Massachusetts that weren't investigated.
Were
And
you able to put together some of your own theories or interviews for those?
it actually, every case that I've investigated sticks to the norm of in ufology. Basically, 85 to 90% can be explained, as natural phenomena and things like that.
Right.
However, it's always been that 10 to 15% that can't be explained. That has always been the mystery. So when I was doing that, I noticed that there was nobody in charge in any of the other 5 New England states. There's no directors, no nothing, no leadership. So I talked to the state the international director at that time. His name was Jim Carrion, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, we don't have any people." And I said, "Well, I'd like to help out. I'd like to go through all the old cases that haven't been investigated and clear all of that up for the other 5 states." So I started doing that. And while I was doing that, I said, "Hey, I'm going all over the place. I do one state, then I do this, I do that, I do that." I said, "Why don't I simplify this thing?" So I called Jim up. I said, "Jim, for the time being, why don't we just turn MUFON in my areas, the 6 New England states? Why don't we turn them into one entity
Okay. That's
until
a
I
good
could get
idea.
state registered?" That's how the
Right.
name New England MUFON.
Oh, okay. That's how
I
it came about.
I was the founder of New England MUFON. Yes.
So you coined that. Good for
Yep.
you, Steve.
Yeah, and I did that. Worked on all of those things. I mean, I must have, just doing that, I must have investigated and completed over 200 cases
That's a lot of cases.
at the time. Yes, and it was interesting to do because some things you knew right away what they were, and others you're scratching your head saying, "What the heck could that be?"
Tell me more about the 10 to 15%.
Well, there's always historically the stats in ufology, since MUFON has been investigating cases. It just started out with J. Allen Hynek investigating cases. It's always been 10 to 15, within that area. It's always been 10 to 15% that can't be explained.
Any of those stick out in your mind that you want to talk about that were unexplainable and just so weird that you just went, what the?
Oh, I had a case goes back to what was the date on that one? I got it right here. I think it was 20. Yeah, it goes back to 2010. I had a case. It was actually referred to me, not even through MUFON. This is referred to me directly by Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center. It happened in Laconia, New Hampshire. And what happened was, and this is difficult to explain.
No, you're doing really good, Steve.
There were two teenagers. They had the girl's mother's car, and they were at this place in Laconia, New Hampshire called Fun Spot. It's like a video game arcade type of place, but it was a pretty big place.
Okay.
Because this area, New Hampshire, Laconia, it was like a tourist area.
Right.
So these two kids, they were in the girl's mother's car that they borrowed. They were after dark, and they said, "Well, let's go parking." You know what parking is. So
Right.
they
Yeah.
went to the other end of the parking lot where nobody else was, and they were parking, looking at the moon, which is right out there, right out of the windshield for them. And they, all of a sudden, they noticed coming from the right-hand side a dark line, almost like an oval that you couldn't quite make out. It was a thin, dark line, and it started moving towards the moon, and it went past the moon. You could see the silhouette when it passed the moon, and it went all the way past the moon, and all of a sudden, as if it had seen them, it turned back in front of the moon, and then turned and started coming directly towards them, as if it had seen them.
Okay.
And he turns around and he said, "We're getting the hell out of here," He said, "But," so they take off like a bat out of hell, and they by the time they get around, they have to go all the way around the parking lot to get to where the exit is, and it was a decent sized parking lot. And just when they got around the corner and they were heading towards the exit to go out, they see the thing again, and it's right in front of them. They had to stop the car, and as they stopped, it started moving slowly towards them, and it just came right above them and hovered over their car. Now, the kid that was driving, the guy, he had his window cracked, probably about a few inches, because it was a little bit of a warm night. And all of a sudden, this thing, everything just started hovering. The car started shaking, and he felt some kind of energy or some kind of force trying to pull him out the window of the car. And he panicked, and he started, trying to stop it from pulling him out. And when he was struggling, his leg hit the steering wheel, and it set the horn off. The second the horn went off, the car got dropped, and this thing took off.
Car was dropped. Wow.
It
Wow.
might have startled them.
So the
So
car was being lifted, Steve?
it was lifted. Come to find out, it was about 2 feet off the ground,
Wow.
and it dropped the car while they were in it. So that kind of shook them up a lot. So they said, "We're getting out of here." The object disappeared. They said, "We're getting out of here." So they get out, and they go to her mother's house. and they tell them the story. They tell the mother the story of what happened. And her mother's like didn't know what to think, and
Right.
She went out and looked at there was damage on the car to the front undercarriage and everything. The windshield was cracked. Uh, so I mean, like, a number of things happened to the car, and so she called the police. So the police went down to the house, and she showed them.
Yeah.
And
What did the police think?
they didn't know what to think. Well, and uh, so the story got out, and it got to the National UFO Reporting Center, and that's when Peter Davenport got in touch with me and asked me to check the case out, and do the case.
Right.
So I went to Laconia. I talked to one of the first things I did. I talked to the witnesses and the mother on the phone, and I called the police department and talked to the police chief. Uh, so I set up a time to go out there. I had two other team members with me, and we went out to Laconia, and I was gonna. I I had set up before I left to go to Laconia. I set up a time where I could go to the police station and talk to the two officers. So I interviewed the officers, and all they could do was tell me what the witnesses, told them. They didn't know what to think, didn't know what to believe, because this is all a shock to them.
Right. Did they have any evidence, pictures of the car or anything like that? Any observations?
No,
Okay.
they didn't. They knew that there was damage to the car,
Right.
but they didn't. You didn't usually walk around, drive around with cameras and stuff. So they, I interviewed them, the police officers. I got statements from them, and then I went to interview the witnesses. And it was always practice to, just like I did with the police officers, it was always practice to perform an investigation is to interview all the witnesses separately
Right.
so that you can get, but I got the same story out of both officers. And we interviewed all three of the witnesses, and their story seemed pretty strong.
How far long after the actual incident were you able to get the witness statements?
Well, it was probably over a month because it
Okay.
was a while before the National UFO Reporting Center did their first interview with the witnesses. The witnesses were interviewed almost immediately by the National UFO Reporting Center. However, they didn't go out to Laconia. They just
Okay.
did a phone interview. That's why uh, Peter Davenport at the center asked me, to take it over.
Go do the on-site, yeah.
Yeah,
So anything at Laconia, the actual observation of the site that you thought was interesting?
absolutely. The whole thing. I mean, their stories, you know, were,
Mhm.
were believable. They
And the
We
place where
interviewed
you
them all
went where
separately, and they
yeah,
were all similar, except
right.
the two witnesses. The mother's story, her story matches with the kid's story about talking to the mother. Uh, but so I went to the site, myself and two other team members, and we went to the site, took pictures, and I saw you could pick out, but when we had the witnesses there at the scene, they showed me where the actual things happened, where the car got damaged, and you can see you could see the indentations. You know those parking lot separators? They're like those
Yes. Yes.
lumps of asphalt
Yes.
that separate different parts of large parking lots. Well, there was where the car got dropped. You could see the indentations from the front end of the car in the asphalt.
Wow.
So I got pictures of that. I got samples of the asphalt. I got uh, I got in contact because the car had to be towed. So I got in contact with the body shop. I made friends with him, and I told him what I was doing and stuff. He goes, I heard about that. So he got all excited about it. So I had him in my back pocket. and
So
and
you interviewed that guy too?
I interviewed him about the damage,
Yes. What did
and
he say?
I he couldn't believe it happened. But the good part about it is I asked him for a favor. I said, after you replace the parts and you have the junk parts, can I have them? So he did. He gave me the front end of the car
Okay.
and all the damaged parts. So I
Oh.
took them home with me.
Now,
And
Steve,
what?
did you test these front end of the car and
Well,
all that for any
actually,
EMF spikes and that?
oh yeah, we did. I had a Geiger counter.
Yes.
We didn't have all the EMF stuff back then. I
Okay.
had a Geiger counter, so we checked for radiation.
Yes.
But I don't know if it probably was in vain because it was a long time. It was over a month before I could get down there. So if there was any radiation at the time, it was probably dissipated by then. But I was able to take the front fender and the front end and match them up with the indentations in the asphalt, and they match perfectly.
Hmm.
So that something did happen
Wow. With the
with that car,
indentation.
and correct. And so I mean, that was one of the strangest cases I've ever investigated because you don't get that close to the evidence
No, no, for sure. Now,
normally.
um, Steve, did any of the two witnesses have any radiation burns?
No,
No? Okay.
no, I don't think they were actually close enough for that. It was because it it was further away from the car than you think. The energy they had coming out of that thing was what was doing all the lifting.
Right.
So they could have done that from a distance also. But I went over the car when I went to the body shop. I went over the whole car with my Geiger counter and nothing.
And did those two witnesses ever have any other experiences of alleged things like at night or?
Never. They had
Okay.
never had any experiences before in their life. They thought people were going to think they were crazy.
Mm. Well, you know how that I've heard abductees say that it follows you around or things like that,
Yeah.
implants and whatnot, but they didn't have any of that kind of stuff.
Well, it wasn't. What we ended up calling it was an attempted abduction
Attempted.
At Laconia, New Hampshire, because
Yeah.
they tried and they didn't get it done. So they probably said, "The heck with this, so we're out of here."
Attempted break and entry, and
Well,
they weren't successful.
the car horn probably scared the heck out of them.
Yeah,
They said,
sounds
"I'm
like
getting
it.
out of here."
Like a bunch of hoodlums trying to break in your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Any other weird stories like that, Steve? Any other weird investigations like that?
oh, I got a funny one.
A funny one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got a good friend of mine. I had he ran and he still does. He runs a paranormal organization in Massachusetts called the Essex County Ghost Project.
Okay.
And and he asked me if I'd come. They were having at this old haunted schoolhouses, one of them old schoolhouses with the bell tower
Okay.
and a winding staircase. And they were going to put a camp because the staircase and the school was supposed to be haunted. So he asked me if I would go upstairs before I gave my talk. He asked me that they were busy setting everything else up. Asked me if I could go up the winding stairs in the dark and go up to go up into the haunted bell tower. So the only thing I have for light, I had one of those headlamps, battery
Right.
operated headlamps, and they pulled one on me. I'm going up the winding staircase, and all of a sudden I see something out of the corner of my eye. There's like a little alcove in the stairwell,
Okay.
and I see these two legs hanging out of the alcove. That they had placed a dummy
Oh no.
in the alcove. I saw it, and I said, "Okay, good joke." And I kept going. I went upstairs and I mounted the camera. And we had a big laugh when I came back down, with the camera. I got the camera operating and everything. I did see something while I was up there. It seemed like a shadow passed across in front of me. That's the only thing I did see when I was up there. It was like a hazy shadow,
A hazy shadow?
wobbly, just, yeah, slowly went across in front of me from right to left. And that's what I saw there. And I was able to give my lecture for that night there. Oh, I got a good one for you.
Okay.
Guess who I met face to face?
Who'd you meet face to face, Steve?
The haunted doll,
The haunted doll. Tell us more about the
Annabelle.
haunted doll.
Remember that
Annabelle.
movie, Annabelle?
Yeah. Well, you know
I'm.
what, Steve? I had a doll just like that when I was a kid, and I think a lot of the girls my age or around,
Mm-hmm.
probably had one. And at that time, they weren't considered spooky. So tell me, for the people listening, what is Annabelle and what do you think it is?
Annabelle is a doll that it was passed on from family to family. The first family bought it as a gift for their child. It's really creepy looking, you know. It's got this evil smile on its face, and and they from the time from the night that they bought the doll, they started having things happen in the house, odd things like noises, things moving around. But it started getting to the point where the family felt that their safety was in danger, so they got rid of it. They sold it, and the thing had been passed around all over the place on Facebook. It's been sold to people. You have all these people. I'm brave. I'll buy it. And not many people just would not keep it for long. They put it back up for sale because they would, absolutely felt in danger. That's how he felt when they were around that doll.
Right. I've heard people say you're not supposed to touch it. You didn't touch Annabelle, did you, Steve?
No, it was in a now Annabelle is a closed that the Warrens,
Yes.
the Warrens, the investigator,
Yes.
paranormal investigator.
For the
Well,
people listening, tell them who the Warrens are.
well, I forgot their I forgot their first name.
Ed
Uh,
and Lorraine.
yeah, but well, they actually are now the owners of Annabelle.
Ah,
They
okay.
bought it and they kept it. But at the time that I met Annabelle, I was doing a lecture at a conference at a paranormal get together in New Hampshire, and the current at that time owner of Annabelle was there. And Annabelle, and it still is, it's in a fiberglass encasement.
Right.
But I was like about 2.5 feet away from her, looking her straight in the face, and it's creepy.
Was it?
Yeah, but nothing. Well,
Did you do any like things with her and talk to her or use any EVP devices or anything like that?
Well,
Or
I kind of teased her.
you teased?
I teased
You
her.
provoked Annabelle? What did you say to her, Steve?
It was just kind of joking around a little bit, saying. I can't remember what I said, but I was kind of, just looking at her, staring at her, and said, "Yeah, go around scaring people like that and everything," kind of taunting her. But I was actually, after I had done that, I was kind of nervous to go home that night.
Yeah, after provoking Annabelle, yeah. So what happened when you went home that night, Steve?
Well, it wasn't that night, but it was about a week later. I I I, I watched. I lived alone at the time, and I would watch all kinds of horror and things like that. And one night, I watched a couple horror shows, and I was just going to bed. Then all of a sudden, everything went blank, and I woke up, and I was on my bedroom floor, and I pulled myself up by my hands on my bed, and I was leaning on the bed, and when I opened my eyes, what I saw was not my bedroom. I had the vision that my bedroom was an old Gothic hallway. And if you're having a dream, you can, and it's scary enough, you can shake yourself out of the dream. I tried that several times, and I could not wake myself up. Every time I looked back over and opened my eyes, it was still a Gothic hallway. And it felt so real. And next thing I knew, I woke up the next morning. And I was freaked out. I'm like, what the hell just happened to me?
So were you actually on the floor or were you dreaming you were on the floor?
No, I was on the floor. Because I remember getting up on my knees and putting my hands up on the bed and having my hands on the bed. I was on my knees and I was looking across the top of my bed. All of a sudden it was that image of the Gothic hallway.
Now, from a medical standpoint, a lot of people talk about sleep paralysis and night terrors and, things like that. But what do you think, Steve?
There is a such thing as sleep paralysis and night terrors. However, it can't be that when they come up with different things like that, just like anything else in the paranormal or ufology, not everything can be explained as that.
Right.
So
Yeah. And unless you have an experience yourself, other people will never understand.
no.
Right. Was that the only experience you've had with something like that, or did something else happen after that?
Well, I've investigated other haunted houses with my with that group, and I haven't. I would go to a haunted house. What I would do, so I'd be more focused, I'd go in to the situation, and this is how I usually handle everything, is to go into the situation expecting something to happen. And that way, if it does, you're more focused and you can attack the problem a little bit
Right.
better.
Right.
What was happening, nothing was happening to me, and I go away expecting it so much that I leave the place disappointed that nothing happened.
Yeah, that happens at some investigations, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
it's been
Lots of
so.
lots of good information and things that you've talked to us about tonight, Steve. If people want to find you and reach out to you and find your information and things like that, where might they look you up, Steve?
Well, actually, I'm retired from
Right?
doing ufology, so I'm handicapped now, and I'm living in a handicapped environment and stuff. I don't drive anymore, so I'm not that active anymore. But if they want to know more about me and things I've done, because I've done a lot of uh, a lot of lectures around
Yeah.
New England. I've I received for my work with New England MUFON. I I received 2 awards at the 2009 symposium in Denver.
Hey, congratulations. That's really good, Steve.
That another good thing happened.
So,
I was
yeah, what was that?
this is quick. I was sitting in the auditorium watching one of the speakers speak, and all of a sudden, the international director comes over to me, taps me on the shoulder, and says, "Hey, Steve, you want to be on TV?" And I'm like, "What?" He says, "Come on."
Who's that,
So
Peter?
no,
Jim.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he so I go out there into the lobby, and there's this guy sitting there with a camera crew. It was the Denver. Every location has their local version of the national news that they
Right.
broadcast all over.
Right.
That's who interviewed me.
Okay.
I didn't. From 1 second, I was doing nothing, and the next second, I was talking to national television.
Well, good
It
for
was an
you,
odd
Steve.
experience. Yeah.
Now, for the young folks listening or anybody else listening all over the world, Steve,
Mhm.
if they have some kind of thing that they see and they don't know what to do, how do they reach out to MUFON now, Steve?
You can actually you can go to MUFON.com, and you can actually MUFON has an app also, and you can call, or you can actually go online and report a site.
Okay, so you can go online and just report. And does it matter how long ago this event happened, or does it have to be recent?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, it could be any time.
Yeah,
You can-
anytime doesn't matter. A lot of times, some of the most interesting ones are old.
And is it only aerial stuff they're looking at, or are you looking at USOs, UFOs,
All
UAPs,
of
the
that.
works, eh?
UFOs. Yeah, I had a. But the things you got to watch out for. I one thing I've seen in ufology nowadays is I don't like I don't care for all of these amateur uh the people that the, these conspiracy theorists,
Okay.
these amateur conspiracy theorists. I mean, all the stuff that they're talking about has been gone over. We've had people that did all that stuff. It's been over and over and over again. I don't know. I think they're just trying to, get on YouTube or something like that. And
Right.
but like I had one guy posted a picture, and he says, well, this photograph has been artificially, you know,
AI.
artificial AI
AI.
enhanced.
Right.
And I look at the picture, I said, looks like a cloud to me. And the guy says, blah, 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 who are you? And I told him who I was. I said, one of my best friends was the photo analyst for MUFON, so he taught me how to do photo analyst.
Right.
And what it looked like to me is what they call a lenticular cloud. It looks long and oval-shaped and can have a lot of different
Yes.
configurations around it. And
Yes.
that's what it looked like to me. And the guy, I told him that, and I never heard from the guy again. So,
So contact MUFON if you need, MUFON.com on the app. Don't send any weird AI or fake stuff because Steve will call you out.
One more important thing.
What's one more
One more
important thing?
important thing. If you've had an experience,
You
if
have
you're
an
an
experience?
experiencing, an abductee, or an experiencer, you can contact Deb and
Deb?
Audrey Hewins at Experiences Speak.
Experiencers speak?
Yes, experiencesspeak.com. They are like a national type of thing. They were from Massachusetts, and they were abducted. The twins, they were abducted as children. So they hold the conference up in Maine every year too. And but they can help you if you've had an experience. They can help you. So look up the Hewins twins, Hewins, and experiences conference, or any one of those things, and they can probably get you no matter where you are, because they got connections all over the place, and they be able to help you out or steer you in the right direction if you had an experience and it's really bothering you.
Yeah, and since we're talking about that, Steve, I'll give a shout out to another person. If you are or think or feel that you are an abductee and you are in the New Hampshire area, there's also Mike Stevens in the U.S. with Granite Sky Services at granitesky.org, and he helps abductees. And Mike himself was an abductee. And if you're interested in who he is, Nomar Slevick, Slevick. They were both on season 2, episode 32 and 33. Nomar wrote UFOs Over Maine, and he also wrote an entire book about Mike Stevens' author, Granite Skies. Now, there's a couple other UFO abductee people. Vicki Joy Anderson, she was on season 2, episode 44. She wrote a book with Amar Marzulli, wrote her intro, A Sleep Paralysis with a Biblical Twist. And also Karin Wilkinson was on, and Karin Wilkinson, she was on season 2, episode 38. She's from Texas. She's an author, an abductee, and she also wrote a book with L.R. Marzulli doing her intro, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. Yeah, so there's lots of stuff there.
Another person I get to know really, really, really close. We've got to be really, really good friends from that conference up in Maine.
Right.
The Experiences Conference. I met Travis Walton.
Travis Walton?
Yeah, the guy in that movie, Fire in the Sky.
Fire in the Sky, yes.
Yes, about the logging workers in Snowflake, Lake, Nevada. So I've known Travis for quite a while. Now he's a great guy, and if anybody wants to watch a good movie, is see Fire in the Sky, because James Garner, the old actor, James Garner played the police officer, the detective that was investigating them because they thought that his friends did something with Travis while he was gone for 5 days. So that's a great story to it.
Now, I've got some other people here in this neck of the woods over around up in Canada who are looking at some UFO stuff too. I was just looking for their episode. I was going to give a shout out to them. I'm just looking through. You can probably hear me scrolling through